So the most recent episode of The Mandalorian showed us some Separatist sympathizers way after the end of the Clone Wars. Some individuals who believed in the Separatist cause 6 years after the end of the Galactic Civil War, which is over 20 years after the end of the Clone Wars. So I figured today we'd take a closer look at what the CIS stood for and why it meant a lot to the people that supported it. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So we're all familiar with the CIS from the Clone Wars, but we're familiar with a very Republic-centric image of it. The idea that the CIS are the bad guys is pretty front and center, but from what we see within TV shows and even the movies, the CIS appears to just be a cabal of corporations led by Count Dooku, leading a droid army that committed all kinds of war crimes during the Clone Wars. But the CIS was so much more than what we see on the surface, and I figured today we would take a little bit of a deeper dive into what this faction actually stood for and the ideas they upheld and why they were fighting against the Republic. Now, I've covered the events that led to the founding of the CIS in the past, but I really want to focus today on the ideals practiced and beliefs held by the citizens and the government of the Confederacy of Independent Systems. So, for starters, one thing to get out of the way before we really begin is, yes, the CIS was a negative force within the galaxy. Ultimately, it was a good idea co-opted by a lot of bad people. Count Dooku and the Separatist Council, the members of the corporations that provided military equipment to the CIS war effort, were not operating in the best interests of the people they claimed to serve. They had their own masters, be it Darth Sidious or their own pocketbooks, and they were all ultimately out for their own gain. But, that being said, all these systems didn't rally behind Count Dooku because they liked battle droids. There was a real idea that was sort of rallying all these people to stand up and take arms against the Galactic Republic. So, let's start with the Galactic Republic, because that's where all of this begins. The CIS is a breakaway faction that sought independence from the Republic. While a lot of people within the galaxy, but particularly places like the Outer Rim that were far away from the core, saw the Republic as corrupt and disconnected from the people they claimed to serve. They believed, understandably, that the Republic was more for the people of the core worlds and the center of the galaxy, places like Coruscant, as opposed to places like Tatooine or Geonosis or Sereno. Planets like Raxus felt like they were disconnected from the political decision-making body, which had, in fact, become increasingly corrupt over the years and had been making some questionable choices. Most notably choices in relation to taxation and trade routes within the Outer Rim, hence the Naboo crisis that we see in The Phantom Menace. The CIS was built on the idea of a government that was less centralized than the Republic, while the military functioned as a very centralized apparatus under the control of a far overpowered executive branch led by Count Dooku. The government itself operated with a parliament that seemed to function a lot looser than the Republic Senate, with these planets having a lot more autonomy within the system as opposed to serving a larger collective government. In fact, I would wager that the CIS was designed on this mentality that maybe they wouldn't need a military and that the droid army was a temporary stopgap donated to help them break away from the Republic. It would be interesting to see what would have happened with the CIS had they won the Clone Wars and been able to claim their own independence. After all, a CIS victory in the Clone Wars wasn't a domination of the Republic, it was simply the Confederacy of Independent Systems breaking away from the galaxy as a whole. And that's another really interesting thing about the CIS, is just how disconnected the military is from the government itself. The military of the CIS is led by completely separate entities from the government, and the decision-making is almost independent of any elected body within the CIS, which is very bizarre and is basically disqualifying for a democracy. It seems like the Separatist military is really only allegiant to Count Dooku and their corporate leaders as opposed to the people of the CIS, which they are supposedly serving. And with the military directly under Count Dooku's command, he could obviously pass any legislation he wants, just send in his droids to make sure it happens. But that didn't seem to really need to be the case, because it seems like the Confederate Senate was pretty firmly under his thumb. As we see during the conflict, both sides' political bodies seem to be hell-bent on maintaining the conflict. And even those who are opposed to the idea of continuing the war are persuaded or silenced by powerful figures, be it Count Dooku or Chancellor Palpatine. So at the end of the day, the CIS is still the bad guys of the Clone Wars. They committed war crimes. I will admit both sides committed war crimes, but the CIS's crimes seemed a little bit more egregious. But their cause did have some merit to them, and the sort of reasons for this uprising make a lot of sense. And if you'd like to learn about the crisis that led to the CIS trying to break away from the Republic, I'll leave a link up here to my video all about the Separatist crisis, which led to the outbreak of the Clone Wars. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments whether you think there's a good case for the CIS's political independence. Do you think the CIS should have been allowed to break away as an independent state, or do you think it makes sense for the Republic to really try to reel them back in? Do you think an independent CIS would have really been that bad for the galaxy? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in Star Wars, you can leave it down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.